Welcome to Cory Arcangel, first exhibition at Lisson Gallery, although you did a curated show, Lisson Presents, a couple of years ago, which we might talk about in a minute. But thank you for doing this show. You've had a very busy year with the Barbican Curve project and the major show for Whitney, which I'm sure we'll talk about as well. So thank you for a fantastic show. Mike Sperlinger from Lux, who's been a friend and associate of Cory's for quite a few years. They couldn't remember earlier whether they worked together, but plan to, and we'll talk about your relationship and some projects you've worked on. So we'll talk for about half an hour. It's kind of curious with the seats arranged like this. We're talking to you and talking to you, but I'm sure we can work it out. Did you arrange the chairs, actually? Or?
I had nothing to do with anything, but it's funny that this is right in the middle.
An artwork in the middle. So we'll talk and then we'll open it up for a broader discussion.
Maybe I should turn the basketball on. What do you think?
Maybe turn it down. Should we turn it down or off?
Is it just hit the power button? That'll drive us crazy. Okay, so thanks. What should we go? Are we doing it?
I wanted to ask you a simple question about a show like this, whether you approach it kind of as an overall concept, idea, form, or whether it's really kind of pulling together different works into something that makes some kind of sense.
Definitely, it's not an overall anything, number one. And two, I mean, I'll tell you how I make a show like this.
Tell me.
I ask you guys for the dimensions of the gallery. Is it all right with that droning hum? Is that driving everybody crazy? It's driving people crazy. Can you go pull the plug on it? Yeah, thanks. And then I build a model in SketchUp. So I build like a 3D maquette virtually on my computer in the program SketchUp. And then I have a list of ideas that I email to myself all the time. And that's so much nicer. And then I have a list of ideas, that's like thousands of ideas, and then I'll print that out, and I'll go through with a highlighter, and it's ideas that I might have forgotten about or haven't looked at in a couple years, and then I'll start highlighting ones that I think, oh, I forgot about that one, and blah, 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 and I'd like to do that, and then I narrow it down to like 30 or something, do you know what I mean? And then I'll make, see, this work doesn't exist yet, and then I'll make little 3D models of the work. That doesn't, it's just an idea, but on SketchUp, you can go to Google Warehouse and they have, like if I type in golf club, someone will already made a golf club. And so it's very easy and very quick to make little 3D models of sculptures that don't yet exist. And then I'll make a bunch of those, right? And they'll all be just lying to the side of the model of the gallery in my model. And then I'll just bring them in and play like Legos with them until I get something that I feel like maybe that could work, right? And then you know, like Alex comes to the studio and I show him, or somebody from the gallery comes and I show him the 3D model, and then you know, and then at a certain point, things seem to feel okay in the 3D model, and then I pull the trigger and then I produce all the work. So that's pretty much how the show gets made, and so there's no concept, but certainly it's been worked through virtually.
I'm glad I asked. It seemed like a pretty crass question, but actually the answer is very enlightening. And for somebody who's as relaxed as you are, you're pretty thorough about things, it seems.
Yeah, I seem relaxed, but I'm totally, absolutely obsessive, compulsive about everything. I'm not a relaxed person. I am anal about everything. It's destructive.
Well, I didn't know that because when you did the Lisson Presents project 2 years ago, this is something we did where we had a guest artist and then worked kind of curated shows of from Lisson inventory or from Lisson artists around it. And when we invited you to do that, at Alex's suggestion, you immediately asked for our whole database. Going back 44 years, and I think you probably looked at every work that's ever passed through the Lisson Gallery.
Yeah, and I looked at every show. I researched every artist you ever showed.
You didn't apply to Mastermind, so you know we have the show here where you can go and be the expert on a very narrow subject.
Oh, really? No, I didn't know about that, but I probably could be. I mean, at least when I did the Lisson Presents show, I was pretty much up on your guys. And to be honest, like that kind of filtered through into this show. I mean, with these guys and the dancing stands. I mean, certain works I picked for this show, being my first show, being well aware of the history of the gallery's history and stuff that I thought could play against it. You know, it's not something necessarily I always would do, but certainly it was in my mind when I was picking, you know, stripes and, you know, like...
Can you just describe some of the content of that show and why, the rationale behind it? Because it is very interesting seeing how you place your practice in relation to that history.
Well, that show, I just, you know, that show was done, what I did for that show is I pulled all of the images you guys sent me from your history and all the images I got online into iPhoto, and then I had like hundreds of images, and you could scale them in iPhoto so they show up in a grid, like very small. And then I just kind of surfed through them like I would surf the net, you know, and I just pulled images aside, just almost intuitively, into another iPhoto album. Sorry I'm getting so specific here. You know, and in the end, I basically came up with pretty much what ended up being the show. So it was curated visually, right? And it was done all through just little thumbnails of the works. You know, and of course, when I finally picked it all, I researched and made, you know, I figured out what half of the stuff was, but, you know, and that's how I, you know, like Stephen Willits, for example, whose work I put in the show, I wasn't aware of his work until, you know, I saw that you all had one and it did a show, you know, and so it was fun for me to discover all this stuff that I had, you know, was not aware of.
Actually, you did collaborate on a project that you spoke about earlier, a genealogy. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, well, so I was working on a project where I asked a whole bunch of artists to kind of to produce something that would be like a genealogy of their practice, so it would be like a kind of mind map of their work. And I think maybe the kind of best one, the most direct engagement with the idea was Cory's. And you can actually see it on Cory's website. Sorry, we can't kind of project it for you, but it's just on his list of things I made on the site. And it's kind of a mind map, which you were saying, which I didn't realise, had actually been completely cribbed as a kind of structure of arrows from Jeremy Deller's work.
Yeah, the arrow structures come from the Jeremy Deller, the Acid Brass project, which I cribbed it as one of the things because it's one of the projects that I quite like, you know. And actually, there is a whole section of that talks about the 303, the Roland instruments that were involved in the creating. Anyway, yeah. Point being, it was kind of like a genealogy of my practice, and on one side was Weekend at Bernie's, and on the other side was I Am Sitting in a Room by Alvin Lucier. And I think my work is, if you ever needed to well, I don't understand what I'm doing, but the closest I can get is like somewhere in between those two things.
Just for people that don't know those things,
I
capture so many of those two poles of your practice.
Okay. But Weekend at Bernie's, should I explain what those are?
I think people maybe aren't familiar with Weekend at Bernie's. It's not quite part of the folklore in a way that just
okay, of course. It's a movie about two young, I think they're stockbrokers. They're low-level stockbrokers. Their boss invites them to a weekend at his mansion on the beach. He ends up dying at a certain point, but to keep the weekend happening, they just pretend that he has not died, and they kind of drag him around and dress him up, and they keep kind of partying for the weekend. It's a comedy, I should say. But it's really morbid, and
it's like tonally one of the strangest films I've ever seen, actually, I think, because it's got that very 80s kind of slapstick thing, but it's like a corpse that's providing most of the love, so it's like what the spine.
Yeah, and when I wrote that, I had not seen the movie when I made that. Just the idea of the movie has, you know, those kind of movies are the best. Those high concept movies where the plot is like there's some twist that drives the whole movie. It's called the high concept in Hollywood terminology. I hadn't seen it till this summer. I screened it during my show at the Whitney as part of an event, and so it was fun to watch it for the first time in like the Whitney's film and video room.
So for you, is this touchstone of your practice just on the basis of of what you would have read in Leonard Maltin's film guide or whatever?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely. And on the other side is Alvin Lucier's I'm Sitting in a Room, which is a, like, kind of a really turning point electronic music composition where Alvin Lucier reads some text into a microphone. The microphone goes out on a delay to a speaker and then back into the microphone, and it's kind of an infinite loop of this text that he's reading, which eventually loses all its characteristics of speech and eventually kind of slowly takes on the resonant frequencies of the room. And it slowly smooths out his speech, which is also interesting in his case because he had a stutter. And so it's just one of the most brilliant, hands down most brilliant electronic music pieces ever.
I mean, that piece in particular seems to have, so the Alvin Lucier piece has so much, so many relations to your practice in terms of the kind of self-reflexivity of it, the relation to experimental music, and all these different elements of it. And especially the way that the self-reflexivity actually just flattens out into total abstraction.
Yeah.
So it starts off with something that seems to be just explaining itself, and then it kind of mutates into
Yeah, there's something about...
kind of about technical distortion, about the kind of analog eating itself.
Yeah, I mean, this basketball game, just throwing the ball and never getting in the hoop is like, it's a loop. It doesn't distort that one, but it distorts perceptually as you watch it, right? And it's just about how time, like how the same thing over and over, how time, the same thing over and over is always different, depending on what moment you're watching it. And so yeah, that is in a lot of the time-based work, but also somehow it gets translated into a bizarre, I'm talking like my work like it's doing something. I hope it does these things. Do you know what I mean? Because God knows really what it's doing. Allegedly, yeah. I've heard from some pretty good sources that these are the things. But in the still objects, I'm trying to learn how to translate that into kind of like, hopefully some kind of deadpan ridiculousness.
One thing that's interesting about that piece, I guess most people won't see it, but when you turn it on, it, in front of your eyes, runs through the whole kind of programming that you had to do. It doesn't just switch on and immediately.
Oh, the syncing of the...
Yeah, it kind of performs the actions that you presumably told it to at one point. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the game. Yeah, it's like running through the setup menu. It's like select Shaquille O'Neal, pro level, practice. Yeah, you have, basically, for those of you who don't know, this is a game that's been programmed to throw the basketball and never get it in the hoop. And the trick with these is that the game itself hasn't been modified. It's only the controller that's been modified. And I worked with an engineer to develop this little chip that all it really does is record somebody playing the game and play back that on a loop forever. And so in order to prepare it for a loop, you have to get it to the right place in the game that allows a loop. And I mean, it's boring, but I went through all the basketball games to find one that allowed looping.
So I'm just curious about what it's recorded. Is it the hand of the author we're seeing? Is it you playing it to get it to that point that we're seeing? Or it's more algorithmic than that?
No, it's the hand of the author's studio, let's say. Because I cannot confirm or deny whether I actually did that or like my studio manager did it.
Under your